Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
Fridays to me, talking about the Bills. What else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown.
Play action. Allen. Deep downfield. Wide open.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host here, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt to talk about defensive expectations here on a June 24th Friday edition. As always, Mike, how are you today?
Doing good. It's a beautiful day here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, on vacation for a wedding tomorrow. So overall, just enjoying the pool, enjoying the weather. It's been close to 90 degrees since I've gotten here. So just trying to have some fun in the Summit City.
Yeah. You have enjoyed that wedding, man. It's quite the vacation. Enjoy that. So got a good topic for today. We talked a lot about offense last Friday. Got consumed by a lot of the offensive OTAs, what was happening in mini camps, kind of what the offense is able to bring, Mike. But it's time to talk about the defense and the expectations around finishing in first last year in a lot of defensive categories. And then as well, adding a cornerback too, as well as a premier pass rusher, Mike. So there's a couple of good topics to get to within the defense. But first and foremost, we appreciate anybody liking, commenting, leave those reviews on Apple Podcasts, please. We're going to give a giveaway around that. So please like anything on our YouTube as well as Apple Podcasts. That would be greatly appreciated. It helps us deliver and bring great content. Mike, the defense. We're going to start with one of the most interesting parts of the defense, I think, the defensive line. One of the topics I had written down here to talk about today was the defensive end rotation. Now that you have Von Miller, a guy that's used to playing 70 or 80% of the snaps, as well as, they've kind of gotten rid of Mario Addison, F.A. Obata, Jerry Hughes. Do you expect that rotation to still be really deep? Or do you expect Von Miller to start right off the bat, and play 70, 75% of the snaps?
I don't think you bring in Von Miller and pay him the money that you're paying him to see him play 50% of the snaps. I expect him to definitely get an increase compared to what Bills defensive ends have gotten in the past. I'm not going to say he's going to play at the same level percentage-wise that he has in Denver and Los Angeles, but I definitely think you're going to see an increase compared to what Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison and the rest of the bunch have been getting in recent years. And history shows when Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator in Carolina that when he has a bell cow on the line that he knows can get to the quarterback, that he will give 70+% snaps. It's just that in Buffalo, he really hasn't had those guys. Jerry Hughes is fantastic, but he wasn't a guy that got double-digit sacks for the Bills in recent years. Mario Addison, he was the guy that did it well in Carolina, but not to that level in recent years in Buffalo. 70% might be a little bit high, but definitely expect him to be well over 50% of the snaps, probably above 60%, unless they have a big lead in the division, coast into the playoffs, and want him healthy for the postseason. That's the only way I see him with a little bit lower number, is if they know they have a reasonable lead heading late into the season.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point of conversation, because I don't truly believe the Bills would bring in a guy, pay him what they did to get over the hump, to play him 50% of the snaps. Now, in the first quarter, is it possible that he starts at 50%? Yeah, I could see that. I do believe, though, he'll start to see 70 and 80% of the snaps as the second half rolls on, and maybe sits at around 70 to end the game. I do believe that he might play a tick down than he's used to, but the Bills signed him to win premier games. And the best part of that, if he gets to rest, is hopefully that they get ahead in certain games, maybe division games and others, where he doesn't. Conversely, they can rush him 70-80% in the first half, and then maybe, basically nothing in the second of some of those games. So he's got paid again. He doesn't necessarily need the individual stats to go out and get a contract. I think he's pretty much set for life now with his contract. So it's an interesting decision, because I'm a firm believer that I don't believe you have Von Miller come in and play him 45% of the snaps. I just don't see it. Although, that is precedent there that Sean McDermott in recent memories will do that. And
there's no reason you sign Von Miller to play 45% of the snaps. In LA, he was still playing a super high percentage of the snaps. And a guy like that, you need him out on the field to get his. If he's playing 45% of the snaps, that's less chances for him to get after the quarterback and less chances of him making a play. I know you want your players in rotation to be well rested, and sometimes that will lead to more success when on the field. But Von Miller is one of those generational talents. When he's off the field, you're downgrading. So even if we like guys like Boogie, AJ Epineza, and the like behind him, there's really not a huge benefit to not have Von Miller on the field. Certainly, like we said, probably a little bit of a dip based on his career numbers, but definitely an increase based on what McDermott has done so far in Buffalo.
Yeah, for sure. And, one of the questions we wanted to start off with was this D-line room in general, not just Von Miller snaps. You have a D-line room consisting of Ed Oliver. You have Boogie Basham. You have Greg Rousseau. You have a couple of really young and upcoming names that are very exciting here for the Bills. You have, Settle. What can he do? He was an addition. Jones. Like, there's a couple of names here that could come in and be instant impact players. You also have some of the old guys that they finally brought back in Jordan Phillips and in Shaq Lawson. So there's definitely, and then, lastly of AJ Epinesa, and then guys that they do like that are behind that they have played decent roles on this team, Eli Anku and others. Josh Allen just mentioned him a couple of days ago in a podcast he was on. So, we still can't count out some of those rotational guys as well. So there's some good names on this defensive line. They kind of shorted up. I think they made a play to kind of increase the snap count among the starters. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but it's hard to not be excited for Ed Oliver. He just can't get doubled anymore. There's, too much talent across the defensive line for the Bills to double up Ed Oliver, and to see what he can do with Von Miller on one side of him, Gregory Rousseau on the other, as well as maybe a space eating player next to him. It's pretty exciting to see what this defensive tackle unit can do underneath this new kind of revamped D-line, Mike.
Yeah, I think Ed Oliver is the person that most fans should be most excited for heading into this season with Von Miller on this team, because now Ed Oliver has the potential to just go out there and eat. This was a guy that at Houston was dominant. He's been dominant every level of football heading into the NFL, and in Buffalo, we've seen flashes and glimpses of that talent, but we really haven't seen it at a consistent level, much because the Bills haven't had a pass rush around him at all times. But with a guy like Von Miller on this team, you're hoping that Ed Oliver can take his play to the next level. And if he can perform closer to that top 10 pick that Bills fans have expected, he could really have a big season this year. And just the guys that they've added to this defensive line. You mentioned Tim Settle. He's a guy with flash potential, can make big plays, can get in the backfield. Then a Daquan Jones that is a space eater that can take multiple guys from the offensive line. You have some pieces there that the Bills didn't necessarily have in recent years. Obviously, Harrison Phillips is a loss, and he could do a little bit of everything. But I kind of like the approach where you have a Jones who's focused on eating space and then a Settle focused on attacking, because now you have guys that are better at each skill. They might be more isolated to just that skill set, but at what they do, they're better talents than what the Bills defense has had before. And obviously you mentioned Groot. Hopefully Greg Rousseau is able to take a big leap this year, and we'll just have to wait and see on Epineza and Boogie Basham, among the other names that you mentioned on the defensive line.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the D-line too is that the run stop is also a precedent. They struggled at run at points last year. They really did. They struggled in the Indy game. They struggled against Derrick Henry. They've struggled against good rushing teams. And yes, there are some of the best rushing teams in the league, but you still got to stop. You still have to do a little bit more. I think some of those games, like, Indy was one of the only teams to beat the Bills by more than one possession all season. As well as, you have a team like Tennessee who relies on running the ball. Like, quite frankly, the Bills could have blown them out and wouldn't have taken a fourth down slip to lose that game if they could have done a little bit better against the run. So I do think that the run is going to be a really good upgrade this year. I think they're going to have some really good additions here with Jones, Settle. I think Jordan Phillips adds some stuff to the run. Shaq Lawson made his career kind of later on before
good against the run again.
Good against the run.
We'll see if Shaq Lawson even makes the team. Right now, I'd give him a nod, but I don't think that's for granted either.
Yeah, I don't have someone taking his route. He's on all my I wouldn't really, outside of 20 players, no one's 100%, Nick, 100%. I have him at 90%. Unless he gets hurt or, you're really looking at, there's no one there to take a spot unless you think Mike Love. I guess it's conceivable to me that Mike Love or Kingsley Jonathan or Daniel Joseph could get it done, but I don't see the person there that would take his roster spot. That's kind of my opinion on him. That they brought him in specifically for this role. They've always had that vet defensive end. There's 3 young defensive ends on the team. I personally think they'll want at least 2 vets in the room. So could be wrong. Kingsley Jonathan has a really good training camp, just like I talk about on the offense with Raheem Blackshear. Sure. It's very possible, but then we can't be sitting here giving nods to Dak Moss and other players because
if anything, it's a nice insurance option. If the young guys don't develop, you have a veteran that you feel comfortable with, you have past experience with. I do love the point that you brought up about the run defense, though. It's not that the Bills' run defense was bad last year. It was that in big moments against teams that could really effectively run the ball, they struggled. People will say Derrick Henry didn't carve them alive and that a missed holding call was what set him off on that long touchdown run. And fair points. I mean, there was a missed holding call, did change the game. And there were some moments against some of these teams where maybe it wasn't as bad as what we thought in the moment. But if there was a weakness on this defense, it was the run game last year overall. It was the one part where you think back to the New England Monday night game, like you mentioned, the Colts game, no answers for Jonathan Taylor. Even if you say they were decent against Derrick Henry for the most part, you still allowed 3 touchdowns, and that long run did still happen. So it's nice that they addressed those areas, and they have flexibility where you got some guys that are going to be able to be pass rushers and guys that can help stop in the run. So you got that flexibility to really attack it however you want. And as one of the comments said, hopefully the linebackers are the ones that are the biggest beneficiaries from adding these guys to the defensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. And some comments on Shaq's play. A, he was on a pretty poor team last year, and B, he was playing with 2 injuries by all reports that I've heard. So that's kind of the opinion there, and it's good to get a guy off of that. I think he played his best ball under the year. He took he took a pretty sizable decrease to come play here and to get back to himself. So I do believe that outside of a really poor training camp, I do believe that I have Shaq as a borderline lock, as much as a 45th man on the roster can be. So that's kind of where I'm at with the defensive line position. And I think the run needs to get better. They need to get better against the run. And we talked about simulated pressures. We talked about pressure rate. We talked about all types of things that the Bills were pretty good in. But at the end of the day, you need to get the passer down. Like, you need to get him to the ground. It needs to translate at some point. It didn't feel like it was. One of the words we use as we transition kind of the linebacker for Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, one of the words we use for Tremaine Edmonds is, well, he can do more splash plays. And even his defensive coach said that. That was a fan thing. And all of a sudden it made its way to Leslie Frazier, who said he needs to make more splash plays. Well, at some point we need to take that seriously and not just he makes enough plays. Well, he needs to do more. He needs to get his hands on more balls. He needs to knock more balls out. He needs to stop bouncing off of his shoulders and getting too aggressive at times. So some of that can be cleaned up with better defensive line play in front of them. But the linebacker room's interesting because did they upgrade going from AJ Klein, who was their third linebacker last year, to a Terrell Bernard, a rookie who can do a lot of different things for this unit. So there's that in play too, Mike, that they went out and spend a third round draft choice to upgrade the linebacker position.
Yeah, I don't know if you can really say that they upgraded or downgraded at this point. You're really looking at a linebacking core that has two significant players and then a bunch of backups and unknowns behind them. Matt Milano got the big deal recently. Did he perform up to it last year? I would say most people would probably not. He didn't have as big of a year as what I think many were hoping for him coming in, but still an incredible talent and a guy that's going to be playing a crucial role for this Bills defense going forward with his ability to cover all over the field. And then Tremaine Edmunds, the big unknown. I mean, we're still asking the same questions going into his fifth year in the league as we were early on in his career. Does he have the instincts? We know that he struggles shedding blocks. He can occasionally make a tremendous flash play, but those really aren't the norm with Tremaine Edmunds. Good player. Are we ever going to see that greatness though? And I don't know right now. When you're going to your fifth year in the league and you really haven't shown it, even with you being younger, when are you going to show it? And at some point, you kind of are what you are. And that's not to say that Tremaine Edmunds isn't a good player. I do think the Bills benefit from having a talent like that on their defense. But if he's going to warrant getting his money at the end of this season, he's really going to need to step up this year because there's a lot of other guys across this defense and across this team that are going to want some money going forward. And you got two guys in Ed Oliver and Jordan Poyer who are already kind of in those situations now. So what is Tremaine Edmunds going to do to ensure that the Bills want him to keep him long-term going forward?
Yeah, and I think it's a good question. Will the Bills go to a 3 linebacker situation to where teams are running the ball? They started to prove that they will. I think that they will. They need to adjust. They need to do something different. And I think they drafted Terrell Bernard to do so. He can do a lot of different things. I do think he's a kind of a Matt Milano style of a player. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can bring. AJ Klein never signed anybody. So it's hard to say that they didn't upgrade when no one is even taking a training camp flyer on him, Mike. So it's tough for me. Yes, we don't know what Terrell Bernard is yet. The Bills thought highly enough of him to take him in day 2, which is a pretty, date like we talked about in the show previously. Round 3 is a round that they really try hard at. It's a round that they have gotten right at times. So round 3 and 4 is where they usually do really well. So for me, I do anticipate Bernard having a bigger role than, like, say, Spector, who was a 7th round pick, who I also have making the team and can present a lot on special teams and has played at a high level and at least add some depth to this roster. Brandon Beane's one of his first comments after the draft was that, he was able to upgrade the linebacker room. That's a comment he made, but he only spent a 3rd and a 7th to do so. So to me, did he really put that much assets into it? Not really. But to say he upgraded the room really showed you that he didn't like Klein last year. He didn't like some of the backups on the roster currently. Yeah. So I do believe that they are going to do some more 3 linebacker sets. I do believe you could play a little bit of big nickel, quote unquote, with him. But look, Taron Johnson's a starter in this defense. As you kind of look at corner now, Taron Johnson's a starter. You got to take him off the field. They have him in there as a 3rd linebacker at times, even though, he's small in stature per se. So I do believe that there's a lot to like about that, Mike, to have Taron Johnson as a day 1 starter. I mean, that's just, they're not going to take him off the field.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Terrell Bernard transitions and fits in with the Bills. After looking more into his college tape and what he did at Baylor, the guy was an impact player. And obviously height, size, maybe that led to him dropping a little bit. But you're talking about a guy that got to the quarterback, had some good instincts in coverage. He was a force in the Big 12. And I think it was Matt Bowen, maybe Corey Warrior, one of the two, who had tweeted earlier this offseason that you're going to start seeing a lot more of those smaller linebackers in that 215 to 225 mold across the NFL in the upcoming years as defenses start to transition to trying to cover these tight ends and different players that are all over the field, because you need some speedy linebackers. It's not like what it used to be. You need guys that can cover almost anywhere on the field. And Terrell Bernard and even Spector, maybe more of a flyer on him, are guys that maybe Brandon Beane is targeting just as a way of attacking the future of the NFL, with how defenses continuously evolve to try to stop NFL offenses, especially as the league continues to go more passing first. So we'll see. I don't want to say that I expect big things from Terrell Bernard day one, but for the Bills to draft him in the 3rd round, when a lot of people had him as a mid 4th, maybe an early 5th, does say that the Bills are high on this guy.
Yeah, that's kind of my point, is that they really designated him to be a player to watch, a guy that they scouted pretty heavily based on all the reports I've read, and that they really are interested in him playing. I don't believe he takes a redshirt year. He is some insurance, but he really doesn't play what they do mainly with Tremaine Edmonds. So I don't believe he's just a true swap out once Tremaine walks next year, if he walks. I do believe it's more of a potential match with Tremaine Edmonds. So Terrell Bernard's a guy that can blitz. He can get his hands on balls. He's a really tackles machine. He's a dozer. There's a lot to like about his film that that I've started to watch a little bit of. So I'm pretty excited that, he's going to be one of the main pieces to this defense that no one knows about, actually, I should say. Like someone that you don't know about, that we don't know what he's going to bring to this defense. But just like any rookie, just like we didn't even know rookie level Gabriel Davis, I think that that's kind of the defensive expectations that you might get out of him. And real quickly is thrust into action with an injury, that those two have shown the ability to get hurt. So he's pretty important depth, if nothing else. And I do believe he adds a tick of what he was able to do in a high level of college football, maybe more than an aging AJ Klein. So to me, that's what I have there. Behind them, Mike, I know we talked a lot about the starters here on the linebacking unit. You like we mentioned the aforementioned Spector. You have, Matt Akavich as their linebacker. Terrell Dodson is a guy that, should make the team. Andre Smith got suspended, so that should make the way for Spector to be on the roster. But, Joe Giles Harris, a guy they like on their practice squad, Markel Lee, just some standard names behind them. So I do believe they felt really good about adding Bernard and Spector, what they were able to do in the draft in that room. And I still will always stick out in my head with Brandon Beane. One of the first things he mentioned was upgrading the linebacker room, which was like, he really did think that was weak. And I do believe Bernard has a role on this defense and not just someone to sit and play 5% of the snaps this season. So
yeah, depth definitely isn't strong on this unit. So it's one where you got two guys you're comfortable with. Hopefully now with Bernard, you have a third guy that you think can step up. But Dodson, you're getting an okay backup, nothing really special there, not to be hard. And then behind him, it's really very thin and not really guys that you're going to feel super comfortable with if they're out on the field in critical situations.
Absolutely. So continuing on with cornerback, one of the most intriguing units of the defense. D-line to me is the most set. Linebacker is the weakest with depth, but does have some top end talent. But cornerback's the most, and then safety is kind of the most just straight up what it is. Cornerback's the most interesting because there's so many ways they can go after the first four that it's wild that there's a lot that they can do here. They didn't add a veteran. Dane Jackson is going to go in at their veteran, sitting in that fourth cornerback role. Taron Johnson, we talked about a little bit already, is their third corner. We all know about Trey White. We'll see what he looks like here shortly coming back from this summer break, as well as, potentially day one cornerback 2 in Kaiir Elam. That's, there's a ton there already in the top 4, but now you're talking about guys that have already gotten some run. Cam Lewis is a guy that, that Leslie Frazier was able to point to as improving and a guy that they really do like, and he's made rosters before. You have Elijah Griffin, a guy that showed a little bit as a college free agent. You have the flashy Nick McLeod, a guy that, has already shown to be really good in training camp or in OTAs, I should say. Not to mention a couple of other UDFAs. So there is some definitely intriguing names, Saran Neal, and then you also drafted Christian Benford in the 6th round. So there's some pretty interesting names behind the top 4. So, can we sit here and say with confidence that Dane Jackson's 100% a lock? I like to think he's like Shaq Lawson level, 90, 95, but I don't think we can say he's for sure the cornerback for Mike.
Yeah, so I like the top four. Is Dane Jackson a lock? I would say he's a lock. I feel like the Bills are pretty high on Dane Jackson. And going into last year, there was talk, could he be number 2 behind Trey White? Obviously didn't play out that way. Levi Wallace got the job. But this is a unit that I feel really strong about on the squad. Obviously, Trey White's injury timetable for recovery leaves a lot up in the air with how you feel about them to start the season. Assuming Trey White is healthy whenever he comes back, this is one of the better units they have. Kaiir Elam, he'll probably have some learning curves, some ups and downs as a rookie, but I feel really strongly about what he can bring to the table. When looking at this draft class for cornerbacks, everybody kept talking about the LSU corner and how he didn't really have great tape in recent years. But if you go back a couple years to the national championship squad that LSU had, he was one of the best corners in the country. And it's kind of similar with Kaiir Elam. 2021 was not his best year. He struggled at times tackling. His form was a little bit off with the tackling. But you look at 2020, and he was dynamite in the SEC, the best league by far in college football. You look at his athleticism. You look at how he did against some of the best wide receivers in the country. And this guy has tremendous potential. And I think the Bills' track record with Sean McDermott of developing corners and getting more out of less, he should fit in right away and be a solid player for this Bills defense. Taron Johnson as the slot corner, one of the best in the league, maybe a little undersized, but the physicality he brings and how he contributes to the Bills defense on a weekly basis, probably one of the most underrated players on this Bills roster. He's never going to get the love of a Trey White or a Von Miller or any of the Bills' great offensive players, but Taron Johnson has been a significant player. And you look at a couple of players he's made, a couple of plays he's made in just Bills history and where they stand. That pick 6 against Baltimore in the AFC divisional 2 years ago, that's one of the greatest plays in Bills history. And even the pick 6 against Pittsburgh earlier in the year. So love Taron Johnson, love Kaiir Elam. Gotta hope that Trey White is healthy. Don't rush him back. I've said on here multiple times that I believe he's going to be back sooner than what most fans think. That's just my opinion. I don't have any inside information. Just recent trends with ACL injuries. People are coming back sooner than ever before. In fact, he's a corner, not a quarterback. Maybe they'll be a little bit more cautious with it. Maybe he'll miss some time. We'll just have to wait and see. And if he does miss time, you just gotta trust Dane Jackson. And as far as the depth, like you said, Kevin, Christian Benford, there's some reasons to be excited there. Good athlete, has a really good RAS, played at the FCS level, but was pretty dynamite at Villanova. And guys like Siren Neal and the like, if they have to step up, we know that they have experience. Are they the top options for this team? No, but you know that they're not going to just completely crap the bed if they're on the field. So it's a good unit. Depth, I wish it might have been a little bit stronger. I thought there was a chance that they could bring a free agent in at some point during the offseason, but unless there's a signing right before training camp, doesn't seem as likely now as what it did a month or two before the draft.
Yeah, and if you look at Trey White, it's a good question about, is he going to be ready for week 1? I still think he is. I still think the team will benefit from him even in a reserve role, even active, getting ready, getting up on game day, emergency situations, maybe even inactive possibly. But I think that routine is huge for players rather than 4 to 6 and then coming back and then having to do that stuff and having to be ready for game 5. I absolutely think that it's possible that he goes on IR because it's 4 weeks now, that he can come back off of it. That's definitely a situation that's doable. I think the PUP was moved to 4 weeks too. So that's possible. That I don't believe that a week longer, any situation to where he'd be out 5, 6, 7, I don't believe the Bills entertain. I do believe that he is a situation that he'll show up to camp. He'll start on the PUP list, and then we'll see what happens with him. And then the Bills won't really have to say much as he sits on the PUP list. I think they're protected by some, like, they don't have to talk about PUP players unless they feel like it. So I do believe that's where he starts. That's where he'll see him, but you'll see him ramping up throughout on videos and individual drills and on the bike and things like that as, late July, early August roll on. So I do believe that Trey White is active. I don't believe he goes on any of those lists to give the Bills more flexibility. And I say it all the time. You need inactives on game day anyways. You have to inactivate people. And I think it's better with one of your best players on your team that if he has to be inactive, fine. You have to put down people anyways. And you might try a guy like Nick McLeod on the practice squad to see if you can sit him there, or even Christian Benford or even Elijah Griffin, if you have to keep going deeper, to be sitting on the practice squad as kind of that Trey White replacement if needed. But Trey White, I do believe, will be up on the active roster at points early this year. I don't really see him on any of the lists. I do think the Bills will want more flexibility with him than he's going to be able to give in terms of sitting on a list and having to be out 4 to 6. But if he is on a list, and that means he was never really ready. If he goes on a list, that really does show to me that there was no chance that he was ready early in September.
That's a good point. And if we do see him on a list, then you're really hoping more that he'll be ready 100% towards the end of the season. At that point, you're not rushing him back for anything. You're hoping that you're surviving without him to the midway point, and then only comes back when he gets to 100%. You're not going to put a 75, 80% Trey White on the field if it's week 7 and you're 5-2 and you're getting by without him at that point. You did bring up some of the depth guys too. Nick McLeod, maybe he has a chance to play some time and make the team if Trey White somehow isn't ready to go at the beginning of the year. Cam Lewis stepped up when needed at times last year. So there are some guys deep in this roster that can step up if necessary. And if you are the Bills, though, it is a good thing knowing that the secondary and cornerback is one of those positions where it doesn't seem to matter who the Bills plug in there. They seem to have success with almost anybody there. Not saying that you want to play with a lesser talented player, but you just look back to 2017 when McDermott and Frazier came here. They've always had success with whoever is on the field. The fact that Levi Wallace went from undrafted free agent to a starter on the squad for as many years as he's been here is just a testament to how well they are at recognizing cornerback talent and being able to develop guys to fit into their scheme and system. So while I'd want Trey White back sooner, I'm not going to be devastated if not. One thing I do want to add, I know there was someone in the comments alluding to timetable and rumors with Trey White. At this point, I don't think anybody outside of Trey White and the coaching staff in the front office knows what his timetable truly is. The Bills are notoriously tight-lipped with information, and with something like that, I don't think they're letting anybody know. So until something comes out that, like you said, Kev, that he's on a list or he's going to miss time, I'm not going to believe anything. I'm not going to base information off of previous ACL injuries and stuff like that. The doctors and Trey know what's going on. And until I have a reason to be pessimistic, I'm going to hope for the best.
And I'm going to trend positive in the rehab process. It looks good. Everything we've heard and seen so far. I don't believe there's any reason to sugarcoat it at this stage. I think you would get the standard, well, we're not going to talk about it yet. I do believe that there is some good news around Trey White. Like I said, no one has the exact knowledge or dates. We're really excited for Trey White, and thanks, Vlad. We appreciate you for coming and tuning on. We always appreciate our loyal supporters here on the Going Deep Fridays. We know it's late June. We know there's a lot of stuff going on, but we really appreciate everybody tuning in and wanting to talk about the Bills defense. As you know, so this is going to come up on us quick, guys. We're talking about in 1 month.
1 month away.
Yeah. 1 month is going to be real. We're not that far. It's not 6 months out. We're talking about 1 month. These guys are just on break. You saw, really cool footage of Josh Allen throwing to George Kittle, one of my favorites. Wow, what a combination that would be. You see that. So, things, Josh Allen's building relationships. It doesn't take much for Josh to go back to his front office and say, if we can't sign Dawson this year, get crazy with it. Give me another tight end. I've thrown to some of these. He's through to 86 tight ends.
Did you hear Josh Allen on the podcast with Kittle and some of the guys?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I thought he said some interesting tidbits.
So I'm not doing this to pump myself up. Actually, I'm lying. I am.
Okay.
But the Brian Kelly family comment, Josh made a little joke, my family. And to you guys that don't know, Brian Kelly, LSU was playing Ohio University in basketball, my alma mater, tweeted it out, kind of went viral. Kev doesn't want to talk about it because it involves Ohio University and he hates my school. But pretty cool to hear Josh Allen make a joke about something that got big because of a tweet I had last December. So just wanted to bring that up for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, the video did exist. What did you get? Like 10 million views?
Barstool
got onto it.
6.8 million views or something like that. It was crazy at the time. So
yeah, that's funny. No, I did. I actually noticed that, and I was like, he must have saw Mike's video. But Barstool, they steal a lot of our content.
Why he probably saw it, but
yeah.
But hey, still, I mean, like Josh Allen has no clue who I am, but the fact that he made a joke about something that I saw and put out there, pretty cool. So.
Yeah, no, it's always fun and interesting to see that happen. And it was a really good interview. Anyone that did not see it, it's Bussin' with the Boys, right? Isn't that the name?
I think it's Bussin' with the Boys. He was with Kittle and the main
Compton.
guy, Will Compton, and and you're seeing a lot more Josh Allen on these podcasts and events throughout the country. Obviously, it was cool seeing him in the match, even if you're not a golf guy, Kev. And now you're seeing him with this tight end academy with Kittle, and Josh Allen's all over the place. Like this is where you make that leap from being a good quarterback to great quarterback to now now he's a superstar. And I've really noticed a big change because even at this point last year, there was a lot of people on Twitter, social media that would say, well, it's a 1-year thing, no fans in the stands. Let's see how he does when defenses figure him out. And we all know early in Josh's career, all of the disrespect and negative comments he got just from national media, fans across the league, and the like. So it really has been a fun offseason to really not deal with the irrational Josh Allen hatred that I've become too accustomed to seeing on social media for 4 years. So it's nice to finally have everyone kind of excited about this future MVP quarterback.
Yeah, and Josh did allude to his jinx that they feel that got put on him with the announcer saying he was 9-0 in those games or in calling coin tosses. And then the next thing he knows, you have him going back-to-back heads and tails and missing them both instead of sticking with it. To start the game's not a huge deal, though. Like, who cares about the opening game coin toss? It's not like the world's biggest thing. But yeah, that overtime one was huge. It was absolutely pivotal, and it's unfortunate that happened. But it was really cool to hear Josh's recruiting story. So go check out that pod. He gets into it a little bit, and he said they asked him straight up, "Why didn't you get more offers?" And he said, "I don't know. Like my film was go." He said, "Check the film. It was just as good as it was at Wyoming." So. And then the story about how he almost came out would have been his first year after Wyoming. So technically after his sophomore year, redshirt sophomore, was pretty interesting to hear too, to hear him, thinking about coming out after his only 1 year at Wyoming and that he owed it to the coach to come back. And then Compton asked him straight up, like, well, would he have stayed if he got the LSU job for you? Which was a pretty interesting question for Josh. And Josh was kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, go Pokes.
Yeah, he said like go Pokes. Yeah. So it was a pretty good interview for sure. And Josh does have his like corporate hat on. For some of these pods, like Brandon Beane will go out there and tell you most things. So that was what makes him interesting. Sean McDermott will tell you nothing. And then Josh is kind of in the middle where he'll tell you some good stories, but then he's got his pretty corporate hat on. Did say he's building a par 3 in his backyard in Buffalo.
Damn. I mean, I guess when you have a long-term extension, you're able to build a golf hole or something like that. But
5 acres.
That is pretty interesting what you were saying, because I've always felt like we see part of the real Josh, but like only small little parts of it here or there. Like when during like a post-game press conference, or when he's talking to the Buffalo media, he's very reserved. He's not going to. He'll give you an intelligent answer, but he's not going to go deep into like his personal feelings on things. Some of these podcasts, sometimes he opens up a little bit, which is nice, because a lot of times with athletes, you don't get to really see the real side of them, the human element. Brandon Beane, he does not care. He's all about chilling and being down to earth. On the Pat McAfee show, he's hilarious with some of the things that they talk about. And head coaches, that's just coaches. Coaches never want to reveal anything. I feel like most head coaches outside of Rex Ryan, they just despise talking to the media. And who can really blame them? Anything that they say is going to be too much information, and they don't want their lives out there in public. So, but it kind of makes sense that Sean McDermott is like that. But I guarantee you, behind closed doors, McDermott's probably a lot more fun than what people see in front of a camera during a post-game press conference or during the field. You see some of the camaraderie during the private moments where you don't have a mic. And I guarantee you all these guys are probably they got a fun side to them that we don't often see.
Yeah, and it got you thinking, too, about, like, if he would have gone out, the Bills were not in position that year. We talk about all the time with Watson and Mahomes and others. The Bills were not in position before that draft to take a quarterback. So what would Josh Allen would have been yet another quarterback in that class, and not one in this one. The Bills would have had to decide between Josh Rosen and Lamar Jackson sitting at their pick. So that would have been an interesting place to be in if Josh Allen did go out a year early. And it's a really good interview. Go out and tune that in. It's really good for July or June and July watch. Definitely. You get to some insight into this player. He talked about going to Mexico and doing some crazy stuff. And, pretty really down to earth guy, and, pumps up Bills Mafia pretty heavily on that. So definitely worth watching. But we do have safety left here, Mike.
Yep.
We do have safety on the list. We understand it is a pretty moderate unit, like in terms of has some high-end starters, similar to linebacker, but even better, some high-end starters. And then just some concern if something happens to one of those two. You have Jordan Poyer, obviously, and Micah Hyde. Don't need to talk too much about them. And then for this specific show. And then you have, obviously, Jaquan Johnson and DeMar Hamlin, some guys that are battling for that 3-4 spot. I'd call them borderline locks, obviously. And then you have Josh Thomas, the only guy there behind them. One injury there, even to your backups, and you need to make moves. You need to do something there. So that's an interesting unit to keep an eye on as a key cornerstone to what makes this defense tick. Those two players have been the reason for this first overall defense, Mike. Not too much to talk about at safety, but what are you thinking with the expectation there from an all-pro, basically 2 all-pros, and some young depth behind it?
I've been saying for years that Hyde and Poyer are one of the best safety tandems in the entire NFL. I don't want to rank them 1, 2, 3. Then you get into stupid, silly arguments. This guy's better. No, that guy's better. But they've consistently been one of the best duos for quite a while. You look back to when they both arrived in 2017. What a season that was. They played a massive role in that team squeaking out a playoff appearance that probably never should have happened during that 9-7 season. And it's kind of amazing that 5 years later, people still kind of call them one of the more underrated duos in the league. I thought it was nice that last year they got the accolades for first team All-Pro for Jordan Poyer, and then second team was a second team or honorable mention for Micah Hyde, which was nice for him, but still didn't get Pro Bowl nominations as starters in the Pro Bowl.
So that's what keeps him underrated.
Which is kind of a sham when you think about it. But when we look at the history of the Bills, and from ending the drought to getting to where they are now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're going to be talking a lot about Poyer and Hyde and their role with that, combined with Trey White as well on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Josh Allen emergence elevated them from being a good team to an elite team. But without Poyer, Hyde, and the early success that the Bills had in 17 and even 18 on defense, who knows if they ever get to the point where some of these guys want to come to Buffalo. Some of these guys want to play. Obviously, Josh Allen plays a huge role, but one of the top safety duos in the league. Stability, durability has played a huge role in the Bills' defensive success outside of 2 seasons ago. And you really just hope they continue to stay healthy and ball out like they have, because like you mentioned, behind them, some question marks. We really don't know. We've seen Hyde and Poyer on the field so much that who knows, is it one of those things where it's just the chemistry makes both of them so much better? If one of them is gone, or is the other one still going to perform at the same level? We'll see, but hopefully it's something that we don't need to worry about going forward.
Right. Yeah, and can't finish off the safety unit. I think right now you have 4 players and you have your practice squad guy. I think it's straight up a lock at this unit. They could always go and make a veteran move if they feel it's necessary at some point, at any point. If someone gets dinged up, I wouldn't be shocked for them to make a quick phone call to the safety room. Same with corner. Wouldn't be shocked if they lose one of those roster level guys, not a backup, one of those roster level for the 4 players and or the 5 or 6 corners they have go down. I would imagine DB they do have a quick dial to some certain players they may be interested in bringing in here. But the last notice of safety, at least, is the Jordan Poyer extension. He is, by all accounts, going to play on his final year of his deal. It does add a little bit interesting of a dynamic that, what do the Bills do? Do they wait it out and then do 2 years? Do they wait it out and let him walk? Do they get it done now for some reason that it would be cheaper now? Like, it is an interesting dynamic. Do you get the best of Jordan Poyer while he's proving himself? Kind of like what you see around league and sports in general.
What do you think happens? How do you see it playing out?
I still think that they will try to squeeze him in this year to kind of to mitigate the cap hit. I really do think that you'll see that, as cap is my specialty. I do believe you see him placed some deal this year because you can chew some of it up this year. I do believe you see that going on here for him. And the Bills can kind of keep him happy, but it would be nice. Players just tend to play well in contract years. They just do. Look at across sports.
What type of extension do you think he wants? And what type of extension would you feel comfortable the Bills offering him?
He's probably looking to retire, the retirement deal. He's probably in theory looking for that Harrison Smith deal.
So like a 4-year, $60 million. Do you think
I would guess
that's fair?
Yeah, I would think that's what he wants. I would think that might be the discussion more than even the amount per year. It's the Bills are like, well, we probably got you at 2, and he did that last time. Rachel Bush alluded to him wanting, he's been a team player, and he has, by all accounts, with some of the deals he's taken and the level of contracts he's done. I don't believe in his card does it keep going 2s and 2s and 2s, because eventually the Bills are going to continue to get good deals, and then those 2s keep going down in value. So I do believe that at some point he's going to want some type of final commitment from the team to retire a Bill. Safeties can play fairly late in their career. I do believe he's probably looking for that final 4 years to really get the most out of his tenure in Buffalo. So that's probably the discussion more than anything. And the Bills are like, well, we might need to test the market for you to see what the 4 years is going to pay you. So I think that's kind of the issue.
It'll be interesting. One comment here: 3-year, $45 million, $30 million guaranteed. I don't have any insight, but if I'm Poyer and I'm still playing at this elite level, like right now he's 30, but you see the Harrison Smith deal and how much he got. I think he was 32 at the time he got that money, and that was 4 years, $64 million, something around there. If I'm Poyer and I'm coming off a first-team All-Pro year, I'm probably wanting 4 years around 60, 15 mil per. Maybe that's a little bit maybe higher than what the Bills want to pay him. Maybe they want to see how he does in this contract season to see if he's really worth it. If he has a little bit of a down season compared to last year, maybe the Bills think they can get him closer to 11 to 13 million. And I feel like 12 to 13 would be a spot I'd be comfortable with. But if you have to pay him the 14 to 15 million to keep him, then you do have some questions with some of the other guys that you're trying to keep on your roster, with Ed Oliver, with Tremaine Edmonds, with Dawson Knox coming up, and guys like that. So it's going to be interesting. I think eventually the Bills figure it out. The two sides reach some type of agreement, and he ends up staying in Buffalo, retires as a Bill. I believe a guy like Jordan Poyer, in his the way his mind ticks, I think he realizes right now Buffalo, playing with Micah Hyde, his close friend, his this secondary, this coaching staff that's brought out the best of him. I think he realizes that this is a good situation for him, and it's a good situation for the Bills. They just got to do the talking, and I think they'll eventually figure it out. But it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, in my opinion. It's probably going to take some time and some real negotiating before a deal is made.
Yeah, I think that the Bills are playing off of 3 for 30. I think that's what they're hoping for. You have some precedent set here. Jimmy Ward, Tyrann Mathieu. I don't believe the Bills are feeling that they can go much more than 3 for 30. I really don't. And so that might be the sticking point where they'd probably like to. Poyer wants 4. I do believe 3's the middle ground.
You think that's the contention, not the money, the years? Yeah,
it's got to be. I think it's got to be. I think that if they're in different ballparks in terms of the value, in terms of amount per year, I mean, the deal just will never get done. But I do believe that, the Bills are like, we'll get you your number, but, we're thinking 2, maybe go to the 3rd. And this would probably be what Poyer would want on a 3-year deal, 30, basically 2 guaranteed years. And basically the way NFL contracts work is a team option, 3rd year of, 15.
What was the Tyrann Mathieu money? I know that wasn't as strong, but
3 for 28.
So that's where you kind of got the dilemma. You got the Harrison Smith money, but then you got the Tyrann Mathieu money. But Poyer is the first team All-Pro right now. Tyrann Mathieu isn't. So I know Mathieu gets a lot of accolades, a lot of hype, and a lot of talk. But it's going to be interesting where they settle in between. And then now you also have the Fitzpatrick extension with the Steelers, where he just got crazy money. What was that, like 18 mil per, somewhere in the upper teens? So the other situation, I mean, if he, like you said, he probably doesn't want to go 2 years on something, but would the Bills be able to give him more money for a couple years, or would they want to make it a little bit longer and reduce the money a little bit? That's a big question for him. I mean, it's obviously they haven't settled on what the best approach is, because we're here in late June and it doesn't feel like I don't know, who knows, but it doesn't feel like we're at the point where something is going to happen very soon. But
I think three years is the sweet spot. It's just a matter of, will it be as high as the deal on the screen, 3 for 45 with 30 guaranteed, or will the Bills try to do something else? And I don't believe that they'll be interested in going much longer than that, I think, at this stage of his career.
Is age a big concern right now? I mean, I know players, we talk about running back, and once they get to 30, they fall off a cliff. But there is some precedent for some safeties playing in older ages and still being productive. So it's you never really know how players are gonna respond once they get up there in age. Some players still have it, some don't. I still remember Deion Sanders leaving the game, coming back, and still being a baller with the Baltimore Ravens. What was it, for a year or two? So I guess you never really know.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll see. Will definitely be a topic. Maybe that'll be one of the main topics here as we finish up, kind of the summer. So we'll see if anything materializes. But it's some interesting, really, safety's a really crazy position to where the Bills feel like a lot of positions get paid. Beside a couple of players, safety doesn't historically get paid a ton. So the Bills might feel pretty comfortable saying, the market says 3 for 30, dude. 3 for 36, and that's about where we'll end. So, we'll see. We'll see how that turns out.
If something does happen and he goes, do you feel confident next guy up with the secondary? Or do you worry about any drop off?
I worry about some drop off if something happens, but I do believe that if he does go, the Bills will make it a precedent to a really big situation, go and get a safety. So I do believe he plays this year. I don't think it's in his best interest to sit out. I don't think that does much for him to do something like that, already attending minicamp. So I do believe that he plays this year. So I do believe the Bills will have some time And it'll be probably the number one need next year if that does materialize. And they do need to get some really talented youth. Obviously, we have some guys we like in Hamlin and Johnson, but I do believe they will need to get a really high-end talent in the system via either free agency or in the draft next year. That would probably be a pretty easy position to point to next year if something does, if we start to go south and he is looking for 3 for 50 plus. It might be something that they need to turn to. But I think Poyer likes playing here. He likes, by all accounts, everything he likes here. But it's a business, and we'll see what happens over the course of the next at least 4 to 6 months, if not 4 to 6 weeks. So there's definitely safety's an interesting one. But Mike, kind of to wrap the show today, what are the overall defensive expectations? We talked about each unit. What are the overall expectations? Can they be better than last year? Is that realistic to say? No, they've added some. We've already talked about it.
Yeah,
the defense on paper is better, but can they be better? That's
a good question. Statistically, will be hard to be better, but will they be better? I think they will be. You look at last year; they had a pretty soft schedule for a good portion of the beginning of the season. They were able to shut down relatively weak offenses. So overall, they had great numbers. It's hard to be much better defensively than what they were last year. Number one in yards per game allowed. Number one in points a game allowed. Number one in third down, I think, conversion rate allowed. Sacks were, I think, around 10 to 11, maybe 10 to 12, somewhere in that. I don't have them in front of me. And then pass rush rate percentage where you're winning your battles was in the top 10 as well. So last year's defense was truly special from a statistical category, but a lot of beating up of poor teams. And then when they went up against some of the better offenses in the league, they struggled. I mean, there's no denying it. When they went up against Indianapolis, they got ran over. When they played New England in the Monday Night Football, even though that was basically a run-only game, they still couldn't stop them for significant portions of that game. The Tampa Bay game, Brady carved them alive in the first half. So they were good, but they didn't really step up in the biggest moments, especially Kansas City in the playoffs, minus Trey White. This year, I have a feeling you're probably not going to be the number one ranked defense in those categories I mentioned earlier. Maybe you're 4th, 5th. But if you get the sack at the right time against a good offense, that could mean more to the Bills' success overall. And you just look at how many blowouts the Bills had last year too. When you're playing in blowouts and you're able to just pressure and you're not worried about other teams really coming back in games, that changes the situation. So, like I said, the stats might not be the same, but I expect this defense to be much improved from a situational aspect of coming up to with a play when it's needed, getting that pass rush to get to the quarterback when they really need a sack or they need to force a fumble, when they need to get pressure to get a takeaway, an interception, something like that. So you add a guy like Von Miller, you have Ed Oliver being able to eat, DaQuan Jones eating up space, Tim Settle going in the interior. You have the secondary guys we mentioned, the linebackers, another year with the team. Yes, this defense is going to be better. Just don't think the numbers are going to indicate that.
Right. Yeah, I think situationally they'll be better. I think it's hard to hit some pad statting games. Like they just did. They just padded those stats defensively, but I do believe the numbers might not overall be better, but I feel like the team will feel better defensively and still probably hover close to the number one overall defense.
Top three is probably a better expectation. Top three is what I'd be hoping for.
I think they're going to be better against the run, and they're going to be better getting the quarterback down. You can't say they got worse at corner outside of Trey White not being able to play for most of the season. But I do believe that between Kaiir Elam, I think that's an upgrade over Levi Wallace. Von Miller is an upgrade over Jerry Hughes. Shaq Lawson's at least neutral with F.A. Obata. The defensive tackle position, they brought in 2 that could be better than Harrison Phillips. Or really 3. So I don't think, and then, basically the back 7's relatively unchanged. So I don't believe, and then another year for Ed Oliver, I do believe that on paper, it might not be as good, but I do believe overall it'll feel better. They'll feel like they're playing better against top teams Rather, I think it'll be more consistently good to great defense, not just a super like shutout defense, and then allowing 300-yard rushers, as well as not being able to stop the team in certain situations.
Yeah, like that should never happen again. Like I don't expect
the New England game should never happen.
New England, yeah, those games should be no chance. Last year's defense, like great, but they were exposed several times. This year's defense should not be able to get exposed at that level. If a team is starting to pound it nonstop on the Bills, they have the guys to put on the interior defensive line that should be able to stop that. If a team is passing all over them, they should be able to have Von Miller, Ed Oliver, Tim Settle, even Rousseau get to the quarterback, create enough pressure to shut that down, force them into something else. So they have the answers theoretically to stop what other teams will bring to them, which they didn't have last year. They didn't have the answers to everything. Same thing with the Bills offense. This year, the Bills offense has more answers to the way defenses will attack them. So they had some losses on both sides of the ball, but overall, I think this team is balanced enough to basically attack whatever they're facing on both sides of the ball.
And until we see it, it's really hard to see that Von Miller won't be the finisher, the sack artist that they needed. So until we don't see it, and it's still a problem, and maybe it's the scheme or it's some way that they're playing, teams are getting the ball out quick. Until we see it, to me, it's hard to imagine the Bills not being actually better, whether the stats say it or not. In bigger games too, like they're going to pat some stats, some poor games this year from offenses. But to me, I need to see it against KC, which they did play a good regular season game against them, and just played a really bad defensive game. Like they just really needed to do anything in the divisional game, and didn't. They really didn't. So that's going to be what's interesting to me is, can they actually situationally be better in these bigger games? Because they did struggle. They struggled in times in the prime time against New England, at times against Tennessee. They struggled in these games.
Well, they have a great one to start out with. LA Rams on the road Thursday.
It doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. Down
Tennessee
to Tennessee week 2. You have
Green Bay football before Halloween. Yeah, so we're going to know early on. We're going to know really early on, and I'm excited because you know what? If you beat the Rams in LA, and you can find a way to shut down that offense led by Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp and the dynamic players they have all over the field. Damn, overreaction Monday later in the week. Well, I guess it'll be overreaction Friday. Will be the Bills are the Super Bowl favorites. Get ready. So hopefully they show up week 1. Otherwise, if they allow a 30 spot against the Rams, we're not going to be feeling as confident about the Bills defense heading into week 2. Granted, that'll be an overreaction, but hopefully get off to a good start.
It'll be reversed this year. You're going to get some really strong opponents, and we'll see where the stats lie. And then the Bills are going to have some pat statting games later on, but it's going to be a really early ride. And Mike, you might have to do that show. I'll be in the hospital on that day, Thursday. So I'll probably be watching the game post newborn on a little TV like this big in the hospital. So you'll have to have a guest on for that Reaction Friday show coming. So that'll be I have the home opening game or the season opening game there due with a child. So that'll be literally on that day is our scheduled date for delivery. So it's going to be a crazy September for us in this household. And we'll see how that all plays out. But Mike, great addition. Had to talk about the defense. We finished first last year, kind of putting into perspective now, and we'll see what we see in preseason. I do believe early on in preseason that the defense usually looks pretty good. We'll see what it's historically now you have one of the best offenses. We'll see how that looks, and with a quarterback that's ready usually day one. So it's going to be interesting dynamic to see a top 5 offense go against a top 5 defense all training camp, and to see who takes that early edge. And that's kind of why I do like those 3 preseason games. I'm glad they got rid of one, but I do enjoy having a couple. Yeah. So to get the grasp on the defensive expectations going against other teams' first teams. I'm interested to see that in training camp, and we'll bring this topic back up in August. But please smash the like button. Please leave us some comments. Please do review us on Apple Podcasts. That would mean so much to you. But I know it's Friday. We'll get you guys out of here. Thank you so much for tuning in live to this show from the Going Deep podcast. We'll catch you guys next Friday. Kevin, Mike, we'll see you soon. And we're always going deep.
Josh Allen, looking deep, going deep.
Fridays to me, talking about the Bills. What else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown.
Play action. Allen